The day before my daughter's wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, her fiancé raised his glass and smiled at me. "You know what would be the best gift for us, Ronnie? You just disappearing from our family." The room fell silent. My daughter Amanda laughed nervously. I simply nodded and sipped my bourbon, the burning in my throat nothing compared to the pain in my chest. After burying my wife 3 years ago, I thought nothing could hurt that badly again. I was wrong, but I decided right then I would give him exactly what he asked for. I never imagined finding myself in this position at 68 years old. After 4 decades running my construction company, building homes for hundreds of families across Pennsylvania, retirement was supposed to be peaceful. My late wife Dorothy and I had planned it all out, traveling, spoiling grandchildren, and aging gracefully in the historic Victorian home we'd inherited from my parents in Bryn Mawr. Dorothy's cancer changed everything. After 39 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our 4-bedroom house, surrounded by memories and silence. The only light in those dark days was our daughter Amanda. She visited every Sunday without fail, bringing groceries and staying for dinner. We'd watch old movies together, just like when she was little. Sometimes she'd even fall asleep on the couch, and I'd cover her with the same quilt Dorothy had made for her high school graduation. Those moments kept me going. Then Blake Hamilton entered the picture. Amanda met him at a charity event for her hospital. As a pediatric nurse, Amanda had always been compassionate and trusting, qualities that made her excellent with children, but sometimes vulnerable with adults. Blake was handsome in that polished catalog model way, perfect white teeth, carefully styled brown hair, expensive suits. When Amanda first brought him to Sunday dinner, he seemed pleasant enough, complimenting the house and asking about my construction background. "This craftsmanship is incredible, sir," he said, running his hand along the carved oak banister. "They don't make houses with this kind of character anymore." I warmed to him initially. He seemed respectful, had a good job as a financial advisor, and appeared genuinely interested in Amanda. But things began to change about 3 months into their relationship. Amanda started canceling our Sunday dinners, first occasionally, then regularly. When they did visit, Blake would subtly criticize aspects of my home. "These old houses must be money pits," he commented once. "All that maintenance, those property taxes in this neighborhood, must be hard on a fixed income." I wasn't on a fixed income. My company had been successful, and I'd planned well for retirement. The house was fully paid for. But something in his tone bothered me, the way his eyes scanned the room as if mentally calculating its value. Their visits became increasingly uncomfortable. Blake began making remarks about eventually needing care and how people shouldn't live alone at your age. I was in excellent health. I still jogged 3 miles every morning and volunteered building homes with Habitat for Humanity twice a week. There was no reason I couldn't live independently for many more years. 8 months after meeting, Blake and Amanda announced their engagement. It seemed rushed, but Amanda was 31, and I could see how much she wanted a family of her own. Who was I to question her happiness? We threw an engagement party in my backyard, and I tried to embrace the idea of having a son-in-law. The bombshell dropped one evening when they were visiting. I'd gone upstairs to find some old photo albums Amanda wanted to show Blake. As I descended the staircase, I overheard Blake on his phone in the den, speaking in hushed tones. "Don't worry about the down payment anymore," he was saying. "The old man's house will solve all our problems once we get him out. Prime real estate, man. We'll wait a respectable time after the wedding, then suggest he needs more care than Amanda can provide with her work schedule. There's a decent enough facility in Delaware County." I froze on the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. Blake continued, unaware of my presence. "Yeah, Amanda doesn't suspect anything. She thinks I'm just being caring. Look, I gotta go. We'll celebrate when this place is ours, and we've cleared the debt." I retreated silently up a few steps, then came back down making deliberate noise. Blake ended his call immediately and greeted me with that perfect smile, but I now saw it for what it was, the grin of a predator who thought his prey was oblivious. Once suspicion takes root, it's amazing how quickly confirming evidence appears. With my newfound awareness of Blake's true character, I began to notice things I'd previously overlooked. His casual mentions of investment opportunities that always seemed to require immediate cash. The way he'd glance at his phone anxiously when it buzzed with notifications. Most concerning was how Amanda had begun to parrot his views, particularly about my living situation. "Dad, have you thought about downsizing?" she asked one day while helping me in the garden. "This place is so much for one person." The property that had been in my family for 2 generations, where Amanda had grown up catching fireflies in the backyard and sledding down the gentle slope in winter, was suddenly too much. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about Blake's plans. I decided to do some investigating. My old friend Harold, a retired lawyer who'd handled my business contracts for decades, agreed to help. What we discovered was deeply troubling. Blake had been engaged before, to a woman named Judy, from a wealthy mainline family. The engagement ended abruptly 6 months before the wedding. Harold's contacts revealed that Judy's family had discovered financial irregularities and evidence that Blake had been manipulating their daughter to gain access to her trust fund. More alarming, Blake had been quietly dismissed from 2 financial firms for ethical violations too minor to trigger regulatory reporting but serious enough that neither firm would provide references. His current position at a smaller firm appeared to be hanging by a thread. Then came the most disturbing discovery. Blake had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $150,000 with some very unpleasant creditors. Multiple trips to Atlantic City casinos were documented on his credit card statements that Harold legally obtained through his investigator contact. Armed with this information, I attempted to gently question Amanda about Blake's finances one Sunday when he was absent due to a client emergency. "Honey, have you and Blake discussed your financial plans? Merged accounts, debt, that sort of thing?" Amanda's face immediately hardened. "Why would you ask that?" "It's just standard advice for any couple before marriage," I said carefully. "Blake handles our finances," she replied. "He's the expert, after all." When I tried to probe deeper, suggesting they might want to meet with an independent financial advisor before the wedding, Amanda exploded. "This is exactly what Blake warned me about. You can't stand that I'm moving on after Mom died. You want to control everything." Her words stung like physical blows. I'd never tried to control Amanda's life. Dorothy and I had raised her to be independent, supported her through nursing school, celebrated every achievement. Where was this coming from? "That's not true, Amanda. I just want to make sure you're protected." "Protected from what? From being happy? From having someone who actually has a plan for the future, instead of living in the past?" She left in tears, and Blake called later to berate me for upsetting Amanda with paranoid accusations. The situation deteriorated further when my neighbor Ted mentioned seeing Blake at Parks Casino several times when he should have been at work. Other friends began to share similar stories, always prefaced with, "I didn't want to say anything, but..." Then came the designers. I returned home from my Habitat volunteer day to find Amanda, Blake, and a woman with a tape measure examining my living room. "Dad, you're home early," Amanda said, looking startled. "This is Stephanie," Blake interjected smoothly. "Interior designer. Just getting some ideas." "Ideas for what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just some updating," Amanda said vaguely. "This place could use a refresh." They began making these visits regularly, bringing different professionals through my home without asking permission first. Contractors, decorators, even a landscaper once. All making plans for my house as if I didn't exist. The final straw came when I was cleaning Blake's car as a gesture of goodwill after he'd driven me to a doctor's appointment. Under the passenger seat, I found a rolled-up set of architectural plans. Curious, I unfolded them to discover a complete renovation blueprint for my house. The master bedroom was labeled Blake and Amanda's suite. The sunroom Dorothy and I had added for her art studio was now home gym. And there, in the corner of the basement that currently housed my workshop, was a tiny space marked in-law suite. The plans were dated for 3 weeks after the wedding. I sat in the driveway, the papers trembling in my hands. They weren't just planning to move in eventually. They were planning to relegate me to the basement of my own home, immediately after their wedding. The depth of the betrayal left me breathless. The next morning, I called Amanda and asked her to meet for lunch, just the 2 of us. I chose her favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where she'd celebrated every birthday from age 16 to 25. When she arrived, her posture was defensive, arms crossed as she slid into the booth. "I can only stay for an hour," she said. "I have appointments this afternoon." I nodded, determined to remain calm. "I appreciate you coming. I wanted to talk to you about something important. Once we'd ordered, I carefully placed a folder on the table. Amanda, I've discovered some concerning information about Blake that you need to know before the wedding. Her face immediately hardened. Dad, stop. Blake told me you might do this. The statement caught me off guard. Do what? Try to sabotage our relationship by making up stories about him. He said your friends had been spreading rumors because they're jealous of his success. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Amanda, these aren't rumors. These are documented facts. Blake has significant gambling debts. He's been fired from previous jobs for ethical violations. He was engaged before, and it ended when the woman's family discovered he was using her for money. I don't want to hear this, she said, placing her hands over her ears, like she used to do as a child when she didn't want to listen to reason. Please, just look at the evidence. I pushed the folder toward her. She shoved it back without opening it. Blake already told me everything about his previous engagement to a woman with mental health issues who made false accusations, about being let go from jobs because of office politics. He's been completely honest with me. Has he told you about the architectural plans to renovate our family home? With me relocated to a basement room? Amanda's slight flinch told me she knew about the plans, but she recovered quickly. It makes sense for you to have a space that's easier to manage. The stairs are getting difficult for you. The stairs aren't difficult for me at all, I said, incredulous. I'm in excellent health. Her expression softened into something worse than anger. Pity. Dad, we've all noticed the changes. The forgetfulness. The confusion sometimes. Blake says it's normal at your age. But we need to be practical. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What changes? What confusion? Amanda, I don't forget things. I run a 3-mile route every morning. I volunteer building houses twice a week. She reached across the table and patted my hand condescendingly. You got lost driving to Uncle Ray's house last Christmas. You forgot Blake's birthday in April. I took a different route to Ray's because of construction. And Blake never told me when his birthday was. Amanda sighed, the sound of someone humoring a difficult child. Blake says this is exactly what happens. You get defensive and rewrite events. It's not your fault. It happens to everyone eventually. The realization crashed over me like a wave. Blake wasn't just after my house. He was systematically destroying my credibility with my own daughter, suggesting I was experiencing cognitive decline, creating a narrative where my concerns would be dismissed as confusion or paranoia. Amanda, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. Have a doctor evaluate me. Any doctor you choose. If they find any sign of cognitive impairment, I'll gladly accept whatever help you think I need. She shook her head. We don't need to embarrass you that way. Blake has a friend who specializes in elder care. After the wedding, he can discreetly assess you. Of course. Blake's friend. Another accomplice in their scheme. When I returned home, there was a message from Blake, asking me to meet him at a local coffee shop. Against my better judgment, I went. He was waiting with his practiced smile, but his eyes were cold. Ronnie, we need to clear the air. Amanda told me about your lunch. Did she tell you I offered to have a doctor evaluate me? He waved his hand dismissively. That's not necessary. Look, I understand this is hard. Change always is. But you need to accept that Amanda and I are getting married, and we have plans for the future that include taking care of you. By moving me to the basement? His smile faltered slightly. You've been snooping. It's my house, Blake. The blueprints were in my car. He leaned forward, dropping the pretense of warmth. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop filling Amanda's head with paranoid accusations. You're going to be a supportive father through this wedding. And afterward, you're going to gracefully accept our help in managing your affairs. And if I don't, his expression turned ugly. Then you might find yourself cut off from Amanda completely. She trusts me, Ronnie. If I tell her you're becoming erratic and difficult, who do you think she'll believe? The man she's building a future with? Or the lonely old man who can't let go of the past? The threat hung between us in the sterile coffee shop air. I stood up slowly. I think we understand each other perfectly now, Blake. As I walked out, the weight of potential loss nearly crushed me. The possibility of losing my only child to this manipulative predator was unbearable. I spent that night pacing my house, touching the familiar walls, Looking at photos of Amanda growing up, the thought of never seeing her again tore at my heart. But the thought of watching Blake systematically destroy her life was worse. The next morning I called Harold. I need to know my options, I told him. All of them. We met in his office that afternoon, and I laid out everything that had happened. Harold's face grew increasingly grim. This is financial elder abuse, Ronnie. Even if you're not actually experiencing any cognitive decline. Blake is trying to isolate you, discredit you, and gain control of your assets. Can we stop the wedding? Harold shook his head. Not legally. No. Amanda is an adult, making her choice, misguided as it may be. Then what can I do to protect myself? And hopefully protect her too, when she finally sees him for what he is. Harold leaned back in his chair. You secure your assets. Immediately. As we discussed the legal strategies available to me, Harold suddenly frowned and opened his laptop. Let me check something. After several minutes of typing, his expression turned alarmed. Ronnie, when was the last time you reviewed your bank accounts? About 2 weeks ago. Why? He turned the screen toward me. Because Blake has already added himself as an advisor on 2 of your accounts, with full transaction privileges. I stared at the screen in disbelief. There it was. Blake Hamilton, listed with authority to make investment decisions on accounts holding nearly 70% of my liquid assets. I never authorized this, I whispered. I know, Harold said grimly. The signatures don't match yours. He's already committing fraud. The shock gave way to something else. A cold, clear determination. If Blake wanted war, he would get one. But I wouldn't be fighting on his terms. That evening, I sat alone in my living room, the house quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock that had belonged to my father. The familiar sound had always brought me comfort, marking the steady passage of time through all of life's joys and sorrows. Now, each tick felt like a countdown to losing everything I cherished. But in that rhythmic sound I found my resolve. I wouldn't fight Blake with anger or accusations. I would use the same deliberate planning that had made my construction business successful. Blake thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He was about to discover his mistake. First, I called my bank and alerted them to the fraudulent authorization. They froze the accounts immediately and began an investigation, though I asked them not to press charges yet. I wanted evidence collected but not acted upon until I decided the timing. Next, I contacted Marion Delaney, a real estate agent I'd known for 20 years. I need to sell my house, I told her, quietly and quickly. You're Victorian? She asked, surprised. Ronnie, that's a $3 million property in today's market. Those don't move overnight. I'm willing to price it at 2.7 for a cash buyer who can close within 3 weeks, I said. No public listings, no open houses. Find me someone discreet. Marion was too professional to ask questions, but I could hear her curiosity. I might know a couple of possibilities. Tech executives relocating from California who want privacy. Let me make some calls. Meanwhile, I visited every financial institution where I held accounts, changing passwords, adding security questions, and creating new accounts at different banks for funds I withdrew. I updated my will with Harold, creating an irrevocable trust for Amanda that would activate only under specific conditions that would protect her from Blake's influence. I spent evenings carefully documenting family heirlooms, photographing them, and recording their history and significance on small cards. Items with particular sentimental value for Amanda, her grandmother's pearl necklace, the first dollar earned at my construction company framed on the wall, the collection of Christmas ornaments Dorothy had selected one each year of our marriage, I packed carefully and moved to a secure storage unit, along with irreplaceable family photos and documents. For 2 weeks, I worked methodically, while maintaining a facade of resignation when interacting with Amanda and Blake. I accepted their increasingly detailed discussions of updates to my home, nodding along as they described tearing out walls and replacing century-old hardwood floors with more modern options. Marion called with good news. I have a buyer, tech CEO with cash. He loves the historical aspects and doesn't want to change a thing. He can close in 18 days and is willing to let you stay in the house through the wedding. The pieces were falling into place, but the hardest part was enduring the wedding preparations while knowing what Blake truly was. He took over traditionally father of the bride roles, selecting the menu for the reception, choosing the music, even suggesting he should give a speech in my place to take the pressure off Ronnie. The final indignity came at the rehearsal dinner. The event was held at an upscale restaurant in Center City, Philadelphia, with 60 guests gathered to celebrate. I'd paid for everything, as tradition dictated, though Blake had somehow convinced Amanda this was another sign of my diminishing capacity. Dad didn't need to handle all this, she whispered to relatives. Blake helped him with the arrangements. In truth, Blake had simply provided a list of demands and expected me to fulfill them, down to specific brands of champagne and elaborate floral centerpieces that cost more than my first car. As dinner concluded, Blake stood to make a toast. He spoke about new beginnings and building a future together, his words seemingly heartfelt until he turned to me. And to Ronnie, he said, raising his glass with that perfect white smile, "You know what would be the best gift for us? You just disappearing from our family." The room fell silent. A few nervous laughs broke the tension, but most guests looked uncomfortable, glancing between Blake and me uncertainly. Amanda laughed too loudly. "Blake means we don't need physical gifts, Dad. Just your blessing." But I'd heard the truth in his words, seen the cold challenge in his eyes. In that moment, with witnesses all around, he had revealed himself. And I made my decision final. I simply nodded and sipped my bourbon, the burning in my throat nothing compared to the pain in my chest. After burying my wife 3 years ago, I thought nothing could hurt that badly again. I was wrong, but I decided right then I would give him exactly what he asked for. The morning of Amanda's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect October day, with crisp air and golden sunlight filtering through the remaining leaves on the trees. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the garden Dorothy had lovingly tended for decades. Soon, this view would belong to someone else. But I found I didn't mind as much as I expected. The house held memories, but they lived in my heart, not in these walls. A knock at my door announced the arrival of Patricia Winters, the notary public Harold had arranged. She carried the final paperwork for the house sale, which had closed the previous day. The new owner, a thoughtful tech executive named James Lawson, had generously allowed me to remain through the wedding weekend, with the keys to be left with his attorney on Monday. "Are you sure about this timeline, Mr. Sullivan?" Patricia asked as I signed the last document. "It's unusual to complete a sale of this size so quickly." I nodded, capping my pen. Sometimes, circumstances required decisive action. After she left, I opened my closet and removed the tuxedo I'd purchased for the occasion. As I dressed, I thought about how different this day was from what I had imagined when Amanda was born. Dorothy and I had talked often about our daughter's future wedding, how we would both walk her down the aisle, perhaps in this very house's garden. Life had other plans, as it often does. Next, I turned to the stack of envelopes on my dresser. Each contained specific documents, photos, and letters, labeled for different reception tables. The envelope for the head table, where Blake and Amanda would sit, was the thickest. Inside was the most comprehensive evidence of Blake's deception, along with documents showing what I had done in response. Carefully, I placed the envelopes in a leather messenger bag, along with a small wrapped box containing Dorothy's wedding ring, which I had always intended to give Amanda on her wedding day. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, and I wanted her to have this connection to her mother. The ceremony was being held at St. Thomas Episcopal Church, where Amanda had been baptized 31 years earlier. As I entered the building, several guests greeted me warmly, old friends and family who had known us for decades. Their presence strengthened my resolve. These people cared about Amanda and deserved to know the truth about the man she was marrying. In the small antechamber where Amanda was preparing with her bridesmaids, I paused outside the door, gathering my courage. When I knocked and entered, the sight of her in her wedding gown nearly broke my composure. She looked so much like Dorothy on our wedding day, it took my breath away. "Dad," she said, her expression softening for the first time in months. "You look handsome." "You look beautiful," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Just like your mother." For a moment, we were just father and daughter again, without Blake's shadow between us. I handed her the small box. This was hers. She wanted you to have it today. Amanda opened it, tears welling in her eyes as she recognized the simple gold band with its small diamond. "I remember her wearing this every day. She never took it off," I said quietly. Not once in 39 years. As Amanda slipped it onto her right hand, I almost faltered in my plan. Could I really go through with this? But then I remembered Blake's words, his scheme to discard me, and his willingness to lie to and manipulate my daughter. My resolve returned. Walking Amanda down the aisle was both wonderful and terrible. I felt the eyes of everyone upon us, saw Blake waiting at the altar with his practiced smile, and knew that in just hours, everything would change. When the minister asked who gives this woman in marriage, my voice remained steady as I replied, I do. Then I placed Amanda's hand in Blake's, noticing his triumphant expression, so subtle only I could see it. Throughout the ceremony, I maintained my composure, standing tall in the front pew, smiling when appropriate, dabbing my eyes when Amanda and Blake exchanged vows. To everyone present, I appeared to be a proud, emotional father. Inside, I was steeling myself for what would come next. The reception was held at the Marion Cricket Club, a historic venue with elegant gardens and a grand ballroom. While guests mingled during cocktail hour, I discreetly placed my prepared envelopes at each table, beneath the elaborate centerpieces where they wouldn't be noticed immediately. For the head table, I positioned the envelope precisely at Blake's place setting. During dinner, I participated in all the expected traditions. I gave a warm toast welcoming Blake to the family, careful to include subtle phrases that would take on new meaning after my revelations. I danced with Amanda to What a Wonderful World, the song Dorothy had chosen years ago for this moment. As we moved across the floor, Amanda leaned close and whispered, I'm so excited for you to move out next week so we can start the renovations. Blake has everything arranged with the contractor. The casual cruelty of her words, the assumption that I would simply vacate my home on their timeline, confirmed that she was fully complicit in Blake's plan. Whether she understood the full extent of his deception was unclear, but she had chosen to believe him over me, her father who had never given her reason to doubt my love or honesty. Everything will be different after today, I replied, which was entirely true, though not in the way she imagined. The father-daughter dance concluded, and Blake immediately stepped in, pulling Amanda away with a possessive grip that few would notice, but that spoke volumes to me. As the evening progressed, I saw him watching me suspiciously, noticing my calm demeanor and the way I spoke with various guests at their tables. His confidence began to show cracks, manifesting in more frequent trips to the bar and tighter smiles in photos. Finally, as dessert was being served, Blake reached for his water glass and accidentally knocked over the centerpiece, revealing the envelope I had placed there hours earlier. He stared at it, my name clearly written as the sender on the front. What's this? He asked loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. Amanda looked confused. Dad? Did you leave us a card? Not exactly, I replied, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. I wanted to give Blake the wedding gift he asked for. Blake tore open the envelope with an exaggerated eye roll, meant to suggest this was just another example of my confusion. His expression froze, however, as he began to read the documents inside. The first page was a copy of the closing statement on my house sale, showing the property had been transferred to new owners the previous day, with keys to be surrendered Monday morning. The second was a detailed accounting of Blake's gambling debts, complete with dates, locations, and amounts lost over the past 18 months. Next came printouts of the fraudulent authorizations he had created to access my accounts, alongside bank investigator reports confirming the signatures were forgeries. Perhaps most damning were the photographs showing Blake with 3 different women during his engagement to Amanda, taken by the private investigator Harold had recommended. The dates clearly visible in the timestamps showed recent encounters, the most recent just 2 weeks before the wedding. Finally, there was a letter explaining that I had established a trust for Amanda that Blake could never access, regardless of their marital status, and a certificate showing a substantial donation made in Dorothy's name to an organization supporting survivors of financial abuse. Blake's face drained of color as he shuffled through the pages. His hands began to shake, causing the papers to rustle loudly in the otherwise silent ballroom. Other guests had started opening their own envelopes, finding less detailed but still compelling evidence of Blake's character and actions. What is this? Blake hissed, finally finding his voice. Some kind of sick joke? Not a joke, I replied calmly. Just the truth, Blake. The house you plan to move me out of next week has been sold. The accounts you forged documents to access have been closed. The evidence of your gambling, your affairs, and your fraud has been documented and, as of 20 minutes ago, reported to the authorities. Amanda stared at me, then at the papers, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first dawning of comprehension. Dad, what are you talking about? Blake, what are these pictures? Blake lunged across the table, grabbing my lapels. You miserable old man. You think this changes anything? No one will believe you. But looking around, I could see that wasn't true. Guests at other tables were examining their envelopes, whispering, pointing. Blake's parents looked stunned, his father holding a document that detailed his son's termination from previous employers. Amanda's bridesmaids were gathered around a phone, enlarging one of the photos of Blake with another woman. Let go of my father, Amanda said, her voice shaking. She pulled at Blake's arm. He shoved her away, his face contorted with rage. This is all lies. He made it all up because he's losing his mind. The old man is just jealous that I'm taking care of his precious little girl now. The house sale documents are public record, I said quietly. The bank fraud investigation is official. The gambling debts have been confirmed by the casinos themselves. And those photos were taken by a licensed investigator with time-stamped metadata. None of this is fabricated, Blake. Blake's best man, a college friend who had seemed uncomfortable around me from the beginning, stood up awkwardly. Blake, maybe you should calm down. Shut up, Blake shouted, then turned back to me with fury in his eyes. You think you've won? You've just destroyed your relationship with your daughter. Amanda knows the truth about you. Amanda was staring at the photos, tears streaming down her face. The truth? Like how you were with this woman at the Ritz-Carlton while you told me you were at a financial planning conference? Is that the truth, Blake? Her words seemed to push him over the edge. He lunged at me again, this time knocking over chairs as he attempted to grab the messenger bag I'd kept with me, likely assuming it contained more damaging evidence. I'll destroy you for this, he shouted, his carefully cultivated image completely shattered. You'll never see Amanda again. I'll make sure you die alone in some state facility. The club's security staff, already alerted by the commotion, moved quickly to restrain Blake. His violent outburst confirmed everything in the documents more effectively than any evidence could have done. As he was escorted from the ballroom, still shouting threats and obscenities, the full impact of what had just happened seemed to wash over the assembled guests. Amanda collapsed into her chair, still clutching the photos. Her carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears, her expression one of absolute devastation. All this time, she whispered, as I approached cautiously. All the things he said about you, that you were confused, paranoid, unable to accept change. I know, I said softly, not touching her yet, giving her space to process. He was very convincing. The house? She asked, looking up at me. You really sold it? I nodded. Yesterday. To a tech executive who appreciated its history. And you knew? About the gambling? The women? I discovered it all gradually, over the past few months. I tried to tell you at that lunch. But I wouldn't listen, she finished, fresh tears falling. I believed him over you. My own father. Around us, guests were in various states of shock and conversation. Blake's parents approached hesitantly, his mother's face etched with shame. Ronnie, John Hamilton said, extending his hand. We had no idea about the gambling, the debts. We knew he'd had financial troubles, but nothing like this. Did you know about his plan to take my house? I asked directly. John's expression answered before his words did. He said you had discussed moving in with them after the wedding, that you were having memory issues and needed supervision. And you believed that? Mary Hamilton stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. We questioned it. Blake said Amanda had confirmed everything, that she was a nurse and could see the signs. Amanda made a small wounded sound. I never said that. I never saw any signs because there weren't any. Blake just kept saying things like, your dad seems confused lately, or, did you notice your dad forgot our conversation about the kitchen remodel? And eventually, I started seeing what he suggested was there. The painful silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Harold, who had been invited as my oldest friend, but had also coordinated with security, and, it appeared, law enforcement. Ronnie, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "The police would like statements about the bank fraud. They've detained Blake temporarily, but formal charges will depend on whether you and the bank want to pursue this." Amanda looked up, alarmed. "Police? Dad, do you have to press charges? This is humiliating enough already." I considered her question carefully. "The bank fraud is serious, Amanda. It's not just about me. If he's done this before." "He has," Harold confirmed grimly. Once the officers ran his information, they found 2 previous complaints that were dropped, both from families of women he was engaged to. This revelation seemed to finally break through Amanda's remaining defenses. She stood up suddenly, her expression changing from devastation to anger. "Press the charges," she said firmly. "All of them. If there are other victims, they deserve justice too." In that moment, I saw Dorothy's strength in our daughter, the core of integrity that no amount of manipulation could permanently destroy. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride. The reception effectively ended, as guests began to leave in small groups, murmuring sympathetically to Amanda and casting concerned glances my way. Blake's family huddled together, clearly mortified by their son's behavior and the public revelation of his character. As the ballroom emptied, Amanda turned to me, her wedding gown now a painful reminder of what should have been a joyful day. "What happens now?" she asked, sounding very young and lost. I gently took her hand, the one wearing her mother's ring. "Now we go home. Not to the old house. That chapter is closed. But I have a new place. Smaller, but nice. There's a guest room waiting for you, for as long as you need. You planned for me to come with you? Even after I treated you so terribly? You're my daughter," I said simply. "Nothing will ever change that." As we left the venue together, Amanda leaning on my arm not as a bride but as a daughter seeking comfort from her father, I felt a complex mixture of sadness for her pain and relief that the truth had finally emerged. The path ahead would be difficult, but at least it would be honest. The morning after the wedding that wasn't, Amanda and I sat in the kitchen of my new home, a comfortable 3-bedroom townhouse in a quiet neighborhood not far from my old Victorian. I had purchased it outright with part of the proceeds from the house sale, ensuring I would never again be vulnerable to someone trying to manipulate my living situation. "I can't believe I let this happen," Amanda said, staring into her coffee cup. She was wearing an old Penn State t-shirt and sweatpants I had thought to purchase for her, knowing she wouldn't want to return to the apartment she shared with Blake. "I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to recognize when vulnerable people are being manipulated. And I not only missed it happening to my own father, I helped the abuser." "Blake was extraordinarily skilled at deception," I replied gently. "He found exactly the right buttons to push. My age, your concern for my well-being after losing your mother, your desire to start your own family. But I should have trusted you," she insisted, tears forming again. "When have you ever given me reason to doubt you? You and Mom gave me everything. A beautiful childhood, support through college and nursing school, love that never came with conditions." She wiped her eyes. "And I repaid that by believing a man I'd known for less than a year over my own father." I reached across the table and took her hand. "We can't change what happened, Amanda, but we can decide what happens next." Over the following weeks, that's exactly what we did. The legal consequences for Blake unfolded quickly. With evidence of bank fraud, the forged authorizations, and testimony from previous victims who came forward once they heard of his arrest, he faced serious charges. His firm fired him immediately, and his professional licenses were suspended pending investigation. Amanda filed for annulment rather than divorce, on grounds of fraud and misrepresentation, a process Harold helped navigate. Blake's family, to their credit, supported this decision and made no attempt to defend their son's actions. John Hamilton even provided a written statement confirming Blake's repeated lies about my cognitive state. The emotional healing took longer. Amanda struggled with deep shame and guilt, alternating between apologizing to me and berating herself for her blindness. I encouraged her to see a therapist specializing in manipulation and relationship trauma, which gradually helped her understand how Blake's tactics had systematically undermined her confidence and critical thinking. 3 months after the wedding day disaster, we had established a new normal. Amanda had decided not to return to the apartment she'd shared with Blake, instead staying in my guest room while figuring out her next steps. I had settled into my new home, finding unexpected pleasure in the smaller space that was entirely mine to arrange as I wished. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, Amanda broached a subject we'd danced around for weeks. "Dad, I've been thinking about what to do with my half of the trust you set up. The financial advisor you recommended says it's substantial enough to serve as seed money for a business." I smiled, continuing to chop vegetables. "Do you have something in mind?" "Actually, yes." She took a deep breath. "I want to start a home health service specializing in seniors who want to age in place. Quality care that helps people stay independent in their own homes longer." The idea was so perfect, so much an integration of her nursing skills and her newfound awareness of elder vulnerability, that I felt a swell of emotion. "That sounds wonderful, Amanda. There's certainly a need for that kind of service. I was hoping," she continued hesitantly, "that you might want to be involved. Your construction experience would be invaluable for the home modification aspects. Ramps, bathroom remodels, that sort of thing." The offer caught me by surprise. "You'd want to work with your old man?" She looked directly at me, her expression serious. "I'd be honored to work with you, Dad. If you're interested." That conversation marked a turning point in our healing. Over the next few months, we developed a business plan for Sullivan Family Home Health, combining Amanda's medical expertise with my construction knowledge. We launched with 5 employees, focusing on helping seniors modify their homes for safety and independence, while providing skilled nursing visits as needed. The business quickly gained a reputation for quality and compassion. Many of our first clients came through referrals from my old construction contacts and Amanda's hospital colleagues. The work was rewarding in ways neither of us had anticipated, bringing us together as both family and business partners. Blake's legal troubles concluded with a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. We heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Nevada, starting over with a job selling timeshares, a step down from his former financial advisor role, but fitting for someone with his particular skills at manipulation. Amanda gradually rebuilt her social life, reconnecting with friends she'd distanced herself from during her relationship with Blake. Through a medical conference related to our business, she met Daniel, a geriatric physician with a genuine commitment to elder dignity. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and transparency, a marked contrast to the whirlwind deception of her time with Blake. When Daniel asked for my blessing before proposing to Amanda, I appreciated both the traditional gesture and the sincere conversation that followed, where he outlined his financial situation, his family background, and his hopes for their future together. There was nothing to hide, no agenda beyond loving my daughter. On a crisp autumn evening 1 year after the disastrous wedding that never truly happened, I sat on the patio of my townhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Amanda joined me, handing me a glass of the bourbon we'd come to share on reflective occasions. "I got a card from the Lawsons today," she said, referring to the family who had purchased our old Victorian. "They've finished restoring the garden to how Mom had it. They invited us to come see it in the spring when everything's blooming." "That's kind of them," I replied. "Maybe we will." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Amanda spoke again. "Do you ever regret selling the house? All those memories?" I considered her question carefully. "The memories aren't in the walls or the floors, Amanda. They're in us. Your mother would be the first to say that a house is just a structure. It's the people inside who make it a home." Amanda nodded, wiping away a tear. "She would say exactly that. Besides," I added, "if I hadn't sold the house, we might never have started the business. Think of all the people we've helped this year. Sometimes the best chapters of our lives come after what seems like an ending." As darkness fell, I reflected on the journey of the past year. Blake had asked me to disappear as a wedding gift, expecting me to fade meekly into the background of my daughter's life, relinquishing my home, my autonomy, and eventually my relationship with Amanda. Instead, his cruel request had sparked a transformation neither of us could have anticipated. I hadn't disappeared at all. I had emerged stronger, more purposeful, with a renewed relationship with my daughter, and a business that gave both of us profound satisfaction. The painful experience had taught me that sometimes standing your ground and revealing uncomfortable truths, however difficult in the moment, is the greatest act of love. "You know what I've learned from all this, Dad?" Amanda said, interrupting my thoughts. "What's that?" That disappearing isn't the same as letting go. You let go of the house, of the past in many ways, but you never disappeared. You stayed present and fought for what mattered. Her insight struck me as profoundly true. In giving Blake exactly what he asked for by disappearing from the future he had planned, I had actually become more fully present in the future that truly mattered. I think that's the lesson in all this, I said. Real love never asks someone to disappear. It invites them to be more fully themselves, to grow together through honesty and respect. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I felt Dorothy's presence somehow, approving of this new chapter in our lives. The path had been painful, but we had emerged on the other side with greater wisdom and a deeper appreciation for genuine connection. Have you ever faced a situation where standing your ground and revealing difficult truths was the only way forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm in their own truth. Thank you for listening. And remember that your presence matters more than anyone who might wish you would just disappear.